Fire burns throughout your library. You thought it was hidden, but it appears that you were wrong. They have found it, and that means they have found you. This is the situation that the point of view character awakens to in the game Pyre. Created by Supergiant Games and released in 2017, this was their last game before creating the absolute breakout gem Hades. But, like any game studio worth its salt, Hades is not the only gem in the pile. Pyre has many different factors working for it. While two of them are Supergiant specialties, character and music, the gameplay and world design adds another phenomenal factor to this hidden gem of a game. Jumping back to that scenario I started the video with, your POV character has been arrested and thrown into the underworld, known as the Downside, for the crime of being literate. The reader, as his character is named, is mainly a blank slate with only one thing known about him from the start. He is a masculine presenting person. The rest of the character's backstory is for you to determine through dialogue with the rest of your companions. You and your companions all hail from the Commonwealth, a coalition of species that was created by the 8 Scribes. The 8 Scribes were demigods and the first people to escape the Downside. They created a system that allowed others to escape and earn their place amongst the most respected elite of the world above. It is your job as the reader to learn and guide your companions through the trials set up by the 8 Scribes and earn their freedom. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I need to explain how the reader was tasked with his duties of understanding the trials. The reader wakes up in a small desert in the Downside and is picked up by a cart of travelers. These travelers become the reader's first companions in the trials, known as rites, that will allow their freedom. The first of these companions is Headwind. He is an outcast, a member of the human equivalent race. He was exiled to the Downside because he abandoned his post on the front lines due to falling in love with the enemy. He's also the cook and doctor of the group. The second of these three is Rookie Greentail, a member of the Cur race, a species of dog-like people. Rookie was arrested and exiled due to smuggling goods into the Downside to help earn extra money to feed his family. Third, and certainly not least, there's Jodariel, a demon. A demon is someone who has spent many years in the Downside and has gained horns due to the harsh and magical living conditions of the Downside. She was arrested and exiled because she would not kill children on the front lines. She's also Headwind's adopted mother. After being introduced to these characters, it's revealed that the reader can guide the three in the rites and help them on their way to earning their freedom. It's also during this time that the reader learns that this group of three, known as the Nightwings, is not the only group seeking freedom from the Downside. Specifically, there are 8 other groups, one for each of the Scribes. Along the way, the Nightwings expand to include one member of each of the races of the Commonwealth. The reason behind it hidden away until recruiting the last member of the Nightwings and true leader of the team, Sandalwood, a member of the tree ant-like species known as the Sap. Sandalwood aims to initiate a revolution in the Commonwealth, restoring it to its original ideal, rather than the bloated entity that it has become. This ultimately adds more motivation to escape from the Downside, as those who escape are venerated as saints who can never be exiled again, which would allow the Nightwings to become leaders of the revolution. Though this goal is impossible to reach as the rites are starting to end due to the interference of the 8 Scribes' old enemy, the Titans, who are starting to awaken from their death sleep. The process that allowed the worthy to escape was finally ending after thousands of years, and with it, the hopes of revolution. It was up to the reader to beat time and help the revolution with their skills as a guide, which serves as a nice transition into what the gameplay of Pyre looks like. Pyre could best be described as a 3v3 sports game that mixes soccer and basketball with a sprinkling of a magic system. The goal of the game is to take the Celestial Orb, the name of the ball, the pyre of the opponent's team. That is where the game gets a little bit more complicated. First, let's talk about the offensive side of the game. Each pyre has a health bar that can be more or less than the default 100, depending on the variety of player actions, like artifacts or Titan Stars. To lower the opponent's Pyre to 0 and win the match, the heroes need to carry or throw the celestial orb into the Pyre. The catch: only one person from each team may move at a time. Must be the person with the orb if the team has the orb. The orb may be passed around, but the one-person rule still stands. Finally, damage done to the Pyre's health bar can vary depending on the species, the items held, or the force of the throw. Now, there is the defensive side of the match. Each character has an aura that operates as a circle originating from directly underneath the character, the size of which is determined by the character's species. This aura can be combined with another friendly character's aura to make them both bigger. The aura can also be used to attack opponents and potentially cause them to be banished, the term used for the character being benched for 5 to 20 seconds. Aura attacks depending on the species, but the first 4 characters, Hedwyn, Jodariel, Ruki, and the Vagabond, shoot out the aura in a straight line. Some other characters like Bertrude, Tizo, or Sir Gilman have unique aura attacks like a shotgun blast, a martyrdom explosion, or a rewind attack. And for the final little rundown of gameplay, the strategy involved. The player will need to quickly react to the variety of different ways to avoid an opponent's aura while also defending their own pyres. First, in the terms of strategy. If a character carries the orb into the pyre, then they are banished from the next phase until another score for either team is made. But this only happens if it is carried. If the orb is thrown into the pyre, then the banishment does not occur. The AI particularly likes this method. The other important thing to know is that the defensive and offensive aura is only on the ground, so if a character is blocking the pyre because their aura is completely covering it, a character could jump or fly over the aura, completely negating the defensive properties of the aura. This can also be countered with a jump, but it requires a skill on the player's part to line up the defensive angle. All of this combines to being one of the most unique magical sports games that I have ever encountered. Yes, it uses a base game similar to something found in our reality, but the best writing always puts a new spin on something rather than trying to create something completely new. Pyre is the continuation of Gen Z's art style, the lead artist for Supergiant Games. This art style has slowly been building and solidifying since Bastion, and continues to be refined in the Hades franchise. The first part that I'll examine is the background and level art, which is very reminiscent of Hades in terms of color palettes, rendering, and stylistic choices that they use. Specifically, it reminds me heavily of Elysium. Here's a side-by-side comparison of Elysium and the Downside Prairie, one of the first areas in Pyre. Notice the harder the lines used to indicate swirls or changes, but also the slight differences. Pyre uses a lot of semi-transparent images overlaid on top of background art, whereas Hades builds its background designs towards a focal point in the center frame. Looking at the picture of Downside Prairie, the translucent kaleidoscope color choices and light rays build to establish a game as being set in a stained glass window, something to be found in a church or cathedral. The artistic choices help build the religious undertones of the Downside and saintly scribes, while the semi-transparent images serve as both a way to easily reposition the focal points of the camera work, while also building towards a sense of etherealness that establishes the afterlife quality of the Downside. The character art, on the other hand, is very reminiscent of Transistor, Supergiant's game that was created just before Pyre. In terms of the shading and style choices of the character design, the characters have a smoothness to them that comes from the shadows, but there are very few hard lines in the design. Most of the characters are rendered with shadows and lighting defining their angles, much like how Red and Transistor are designed and drawn. Compare this to Hades, where there are still shadows, but a majority of the shadows stem from hard lines, and the lighting accents and shadows are blended in a way reminiscent of cell shading. This is not a negative thing about this game in the slightest. The whole story revolves around a religious revolution, and the end screen of the game is a lineup of characters reminiscent of Saints drawings. The shading of the characters in Pyre helps build towards the image that this story is being told as a history based on stained glass art rather than texts or books. And each song feels unique, but because of the similar instruments used, it all builds towards the same cohesive vision. This is thanks to Supergiant's resident composer Darren Korb. His compositions in Pyre focus on the use of stringed instruments, specifically plucked stringed instruments. There are two main components to the soundtrack. The first part is the mix of folksy sounds caused by instruments like the acoustic guitar, harp, and harpsichord that give a sense of energy to each of the songs that help press the song forward. The second part of the composition is the rock beats and electric bass that help build the sense of dread that establishes the downside as the hell of this world. The two sounds combine into a memorable soundtrack that establishes Darren Korb as my favorite video game composer of all time. Now, environmental songs are not the only songs in the soundtrack. Each triumvirate has their own theme song that helps establish the attitude of the team. For instance, Knights of the Sea helps build a sense of pirate and high sea adventure, perfect for the ocean team of the Pyre Hearts. Or the flamenco-like song Skydance for the passionate and angry triumvirate essence. Up to now, I've only been talking about instrumental songs. Several songs in the game use Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett's vocals. Each of them are integral to the story, the most important being Never to Return. The song that plays during the Liberation Rite, in which one of the characters can return to the Commonwealth as a hero. This song helps build up the boss fight to be one of the most memorable pieces in the entire game. That's not even mentioning what is essentially the main musical theme of the game, In the Flame, which is a beautiful duet between Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett describing the premise of the game. This song only shows up in the credits of the game, and, at least according to Spotify, is the most listened to song on the album. But it gets even better, as that's not the only song in the credits. There's another song in the credits that builds up on the motifs established in Never to Return, and uses it to transition into the motifs of In the Flame. This new song, Bound Together, also changes depending on the choices made during the game, but only slightly. One or more of the lines can change depending on the characters the player saves and the characters that the player leaves behind in the downside. Though these individual versions of the song are found in the game only, not in the soundtrack, which just gives more motivation to play the game for yourself. And I didn't even mention that the in-game musician / jukebox, the Lone Minstrel, can play all of these songs on request. But he only has a lute, so the entire album of the game has a second version that is just the lute covers. Finally, we get to the writing of the game, specifically the dialogue, as that's where 80% of the writing is found. It reads like actual conversation, and that the characters only describe something if another character asks about it. The nice thing about the dialogue is that if a character mentions something about the world, like the name of a location or a specific character, that term is highlighted. If the player mouses over the highlight, then the player will get a little pop-up that describes the lore of the game. This is such an interesting way to build the world, as it doesn't require the player to pause the game to reference a glossary. And if the term is a character, then also shows a picture of the character, which can help jog memories or help connect dots in the player's head. That's not the only thing about the dialogue. It also has a very subtle way of building up backstory for the reader. At the start of the story, each of the characters has a bio, but the only thing available to the reader is the name and race of the character. This slowly changes as the reader, and by extension the player, learns more and more about the character. But this isn't a one-way street. The reader will typically get to choose their own dialogue prompts. These prompts will slowly fill out the reader's bio that the games can subtly reference back to at a later date, helping build a more cohesive story. That cohesive story all builds into a discussion of freedom and redemption. What does freedom mean? This is not just freedom from the downside, but also who can attain freedom. The game not only pushes the question of freedom from a legal issue, like committing a crime, but also freedom from self-inflicted slights, or the ability to love freely. Hedwyn was imprisoned in the downside because he loved someone from an enemy nation. Ruki was imprisoned in the downside because he wanted to give his mother freedom from the burden of debt. Sandalwood was imprisoned because he wanted the freedom to teach and read books. The reader and player states why they want freedom and what it looks like to them in a conversation with Sandalwood during the second act of the game. These all build into the idea that freedom is life without the threat of forever being punished. This is where we need to bring up Sir Gilman and Pamitha Thane. Sir Gilman is a worm, basically an amphibious fish creature that looks like a worm. The worms are a species within the Commonwealth known for fighting and dying in war. As such, they have a strict system of honor, and what it means to be an honorable warrior. Sir Gilman was sent to the downside by his own choice because he believed he had failed his duty in battle. In reality, Sir Gilman has survivor's guilt, as his entire regiment, save for him and his cowardly commander Sir Deluge, were killed in an ambush. Sir Gilman's story in Pyre is about learning to live after that moment. He continually strives for honor and regaining his honor, only barely accepting it if the player gives him a liberation right. Gilman even pushes the player to let him be one of the last people chosen for the rites because he believes he doesn't deserve freedom from his self-inflicted punishment. Pamitha Thane is a harp, a harpy creature from the Highwing Remnants, the enemy nation of the Commonwealth. She was one of the best fighters in the Highwing Remnants, a Talon ace, but eventually she grew tired of fighting and sought to end the war, a stark contrast to the zealous hatred that the rest of the Talon aces had. Eventually, her actions caught up to her as her sister was captured in combat because Pamitha wasn't there and Pamitha's squad had their wings clipped and sent to the downside. Pamitha, filled with regret, was told the only way to talk with her sister was to be sent into the downside to try and find her there. Pamitha was exiled and found her sister, and when Pamitha tried to reconcile with her sister, the sister's zealous hatred poisoned any attempt at forgiveness. That is when the Nightwings come into both of their stories. The Nightwings become friends with both Sir Gilman and Pamitha Thane, and throughout their adventures, they both find redemption in escaping the downside, and freedom to forgive themselves for actions that were out of their control. In Sir Gilman's case, he learns to live again, and while he still has some doubts about the purpose of his life, he finds honor in protecting the new nation formed by the Nightwings. Pamitha never truly forgot her sister, and still regularly tried to contact her, but eventually Pamitha finds the freedom to travel the world and not to be tied down to her sister's punishment. Those two are not the only characters that have to deal with the emotional baggage holding them back from freedom. Mainly the antagonist who started the resurrection of the Titan Stars. But that is a massive spoiler for the game and the journey the Nightwings go on. I want you to try out the game for yourself. Which brings us to the end. Pyre is one of my favorite games of all time. I have a tattoo inspired by it, and I will always love this game. I still regularly listen to the soundtrack, one of the only games outside Nintendo, as it's just the right amount of atmospheric and still musically unique. I cannot praise this game enough with its wide cast of characters. There's like 30, and I didn't even get to mention my favorite one. This video left so much to be explored, and the replayability from the difficulty of the game, to the rights under Titan Stars, to the choices the reader makes about who gets liberated and who doesn't, and how that all plays into the dialogue interactions between characters and later rights, is spectacular. One of my only complaints about the game is that it's only on Windows, Linux, and PlayStation 4. It needs to be on more platforms, but that is out of my control. With that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, or night. And remember to like, comment, or subscribe. Sincerely, the Dragon Queen.